Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel Cush, and today I'm going to be going over success tips for those who are exclusively pumping. So exclusively pumping, I just want to go through this because there's a difference between pumping while breastfeeding and then exclusively pumping. So for example, when I first had my twins in September, I came home and was breastfeeding part-time and then pumping for the rest of the times. And then as time went on, I went back to work after 2 months of being home, and so one of the biggest changes was that the boys were getting older and they were getting a little more playful and starting to like interact with each other, and so feeding them both at the same time became really hard, and breastfeeding just became like this like playtime for them. And so when I went back to work, I decided that it was probably the best for everybody if I went to exclusively pumping, where I was no longer breastfeeding as much, if at all. And I still breastfed here and there as we went for about another month, so until the boys were about 3, maybe 3.5 months old. But then, like I said, it just became unproductive. Like, we would tandem breastfeed them, and when they were really little, that worked really well. But then as they got bigger, heavier, my husband would have to like help me hold them up. It became where they were like touching each other and then pulling away from the breast. And so then after a while, we would breastfeed them one at a time if they were fussy in the middle of the night. But as they got to be better sleepers, they really didn't breastfeed at night anymore either. And then during the day when I was working, I obviously was pumping. So it just turned into me exclusively pumping around the 3.5 month mark, I would say. And so exclusively pumping means that you're pumping full time, and then you're giving your baby breast milk, or in our case, breast milk, and then also supplementing with formula as well, because I did not produce enough to have 2 babies fully fed all day long. And you know, we still work with the Lactation Consultant, and that has been wonderful for us. But I really wanted to share some of the tips that I had from the beginning of when I was exclusively pumping till now. So we are at 7 months. I am really proud of how long I have stuck with it, as far as you know, what I had to go through to get my supply up. It was really discouraging in the beginning. I was also very, very sick, and so my pregnancy ended with me developing HELLP syndrome, and so I couldn't pump for the first 8 days of the boy's life. And so that kind of made my breastfeeding and my pumping journey a little bit more difficult, as well as me feeling like I had kind of a lower supply in the beginning. So I just wanted to share some tips that I have gotten either from my lactation consultant, from trial and error, or for what's just genuinely has worked and has been working for me. And hopefully, if you're an exclusively pumping mama, you take heart that there's a lot of people doing this now. This isn't like a weird, sometimes I think people think that no one's doing this, that they're alone doing this. And I really feel like more and more people are doing this, like exclusively pumping. I now belong to a couple Facebook groups. I follow a couple people on Instagram who exclusively pump. I didn't even really know people just exclusively pumped. I thought, oh man, when the boys like were becoming not as great nursers, like it was taking, instead of 20 minutes to feed them, it was taking 40 minutes, and then we'd still have to bottle feed them after. I was like, who just pumps? But then I found this great community, and so from that community I've also found a lot of support and found a lot of people who have helped me use like their advice and their expertise, because they've been doing it for a long time as well. Maybe this is their 2nd or 3rd time exclusively pumping for a baby. And so they just, like, these veterans have all these tips and tricks, and I'm so happy to have found the community. I want to share some of the stuff that they've told me, and again, my lactation consultant, and then just like what I was saying, what works for me. So the first thing is to time your pumps with the amount of times your baby is eating over the course of a day. And so what that was in the beginning, when the boys were first feeding, that was between 8 and 12 times a day that we were feeding them. For the twins, it was really closer to 12. And so basically anytime that we were up feeding them, I was up pumping. Your supply is based on, in the beginning, hormone, and also the amount that you take from your body, so your body knows to replenish and replenish. And then as you go on and your hormones regulate away from being like, you know, a new mom, and your hormones like this at the beginning and they kind of level out. it's then supply and demand. And so there's a lot of things that affect that, but one of the biggest thing that affect it is how frequently you empty the breast and how often, like, or I'm sorry, how frequently you empty the breast and then like how much you empty it. So if you're emptying it 8 to 12 times, you're going to ramp up in production. If you go down more, your body's going to adjust the amount of milk down because you're telling it you don't need that much. And so the best thing for us was to just keep a tally of how often the boys were eating if it wasn't convenient for me to pump while they were eating. And I would just match the amount of times that they ate with how many times I pumped. Or on days that it worked out, I would just pump every single time we fed them for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. And so that's how I kept up in the beginning. One of the things I did not do, because I just got into a routine at first, was I didn't account for cluster feeding and I didn't account for growth spurts. And the two things about that is cluster feeding adds sometimes 2 or 3 extra sessions a day. And so like if the boys were eating like 10 minutes apart and then had another 30 minutes went by and they ate again and another 15 minutes went by and they were still screaming for food, we would feed them, but I wasn't timing my pumps with that. And so what it should have been telling me if we were breastfeeding is that the boys needed more food, and so I should have been pumping. So the same thing with the growth spurt, where they might have been eating the same amount, but they were eating more per session. So I didn't think to account for that in the first couple months. Once I met with my lactation consultant, they told me to just basically be aware of cluster feeding and growth spurts, and then to add in extra pumps to account for that. And you only do it for as long as the baby is doing that. So if they cluster feed for 2 or 3 days, I would only add 2 or 3 sessions extra into those days. I wasn't doing it from there on out. It was just to match their demand. So that was my second tip. If your baby is cluster feeding or eating more per session, add 1 or 2 sessions for the days that you're adjusting, and then that way your body knows to produce more milk as the baby is needing more milk. So that was something that I didn't do in the beginning. Probably started that around month 4. So they had a growth spurt in January, and that time I knew that as they were eating more, I added an extra 2, I think, pumps for 3 or 4 days. I can't remember the exact time, but I do remember like being like, wow, I feel like they're eating so much, and then I was like, oh wait, this is the time for me to add a couple pumps. And then they it kind of normalized. We upped the ounces that they were getting, and once that happened, I was also just producing a little bit more at that point. So it just worked out, and it makes sense when you think about it as supply and demand. If your baby is cluster feeding or going through a growth spurt, it would be putting more demand on your body. So this is a really great tip to watch out for, cluster feeding and growth spurts. Another thing that can cause your milk production to dip is the return of your cycle. And throughout the month, whether you're ovulating or you have a period, it can drop your milk supply. And so a lot of people find that they can combat that by adding a couple pumps. Some people feel like their supply is just down, there's nothing they can do about it. So when you have a chance to put milk and get a stash going, that's sometime where I would say, that's really helpful to have extra built up, so that if you aren't able to build it back up during the time where it's naturally dipping the couple days, then you have a little bit of extra milk to fall back on. And it does happen. During the winter, people get sick, your body is just not feeling well. You'll still produce milk, it just may not be as much. Or for example, like I got a stomach flu and was throwing up for hours and hours, where I was pumping a lot further apart. And so for 2 days, I just didn't pump as much as normal. So it was really good to have milk to fall back on. All right, another tip, get extra parts. If you can, and you plan on pumping for a long time, one of the things that I got were a couple extra flanges and an extra pumping bra and an extra pumping top. That was just really like the ones that were my favorite, that were really comfortable, that I wore the most, so that it was easy. Like I could just have one in the laundry, one that I was wearing, and having more of the things that you're really comfortable in, because you're going to spend a lot of time with your pumps on. So it's really stressful to have no clean pumping bras, to have no clean pumping parts. And so if you can get a couple extra of those and look at it as an investment for something that you're going to be doing for months down the line, then it can be really helpful, and it can take a little bit of the pressure of always doing laundry, every day off if you have 2 or 3 really good pumping bras. I also got extra breast shields for my pump, just in case some were dirty and I was like tired and I didn't want to wash them. I would have an extra clean pair, and that really helped. Speaking of cleaning your pump, when you're exclusively pumping, you can be pumping from 6 to 12 times a day. Average, I think, is like 7 or 8 for most people that I've talked to. That's a lot of times to clean, a lot of times that you are going to have to clean breast pump parts. The most beautiful thing that someone shared with me was to put your parts in a Ziploc bag after you were done, just like rinse, take the milk out, rinse them if you wanted to, but as long as you empty it as to the best of your ability, you can put the parts into a Ziploc bag and place it in the refrigerator. This will keep the parts and the milk, anything that is remaining in there, at a safe temperature. And so you can just put the parts back together, pump again, empty it into your bag, put it all back in the Ziploc bag, and put it in the refrigerator. You can do this for an entire day. And so instead of pumping and cleaning it every single time, soap and water, drying it out, you can just empty it, put the parts in a bag, and let it sit in the refrigerator between sessions so that you're only doing one really deep clean. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's the babies like yelling. They're ready to get up from a nap. But that really saved my sanity. Like, I had days where I was just like, I feel like all I do is pump and clean parts. When I found the Ziploc bag trick, it saved me so much time. I don't do it all the time now. I've gotten really good at, I have an extra set of the containers. So I just wash one, and if one's dirty, I have an extra one, which is why I say if you can get a couple extra parts. But if you don't have extra parts and you need to clean them in between each, and it's driving you crazy because you feel like all you do is wash pump parts, get yourself a Ziploc bag and put it in the refrigerator. It will help. This trick I didn't learn probably until, I probably learned this around January as well. I just felt like I was doing nothing but pumping and cleaning. And so, I don't remember who told me about the pump bag in the refrigerator. I think it was on a breast pumping forum. I think it was on exclusively pumping forum, and someone had put a Ziploc bag up with the parts in it and said "my best friend," and they had written a blog about it. And so I went over and saw that that's what they were doing, and so many people commented, "Oh my gosh, this was an amazing trick, thank you." So whoever that was, thank you for telling me about it. You are a lifesaver. I'm not sure if my lactation consultant mentioned that or having extra parts, but when I was looking for support on my exclusively pumping journey, she had a lot of tips about, making sure that you're comfortable drinking the water to get up in the middle of the night, having the extra parts, just to make your life more convenient. You're doing a big job, right? You're pumping all day long to feed a baby. Just like people who are breastfeeding, it's a lot of work, and whatever you can do to make yourself more comfortable. This is an investment in your sanity, in your time, and you're putting a lot of effort in. And so the more things that you can do to support yourself, the more successful you're going to be. And the more you're going to enjoy it while you do it. You just don't, I feel bad when I was hitting this place several times through my exclusively pumping journey where I was just like, I can't do this. This is overwhelming. But I felt really lucky to have come across different support groups and have a lactation consultant who was really like, hey, okay, if you're done, it's fine. But this is something that I ran into, and this is how I fixed it. And I was able to make this journey a little bit easier. It's still a lot of work every single day. But to me, I'm just grateful that I have found all these tips and tricks to make things as easy for me as I feel like they possibly could be. Speaking of lactation consultant, that is one of my last tips for you guys. My lactation consultant has been amazing. So I saw one originally who helped us diagnose the boys with lip and tongue ties. so that when I was breastfeeding, they were able to latch and nurse a lot better. I met with a second lactation consultant when I switched to be exclusively pumping, because she spoke a lot about that and had support for that. And so I just really felt like we were on the same page. And so I've seen her a total of 2 times. And then I did a tele-call with her this past month. And I can't tell you the peace of mind I get, even if I'm not learning anything new, which that doesn't really happen. I feel like every time I go, I learn something new, but I have all the information. And I think sometimes just having someone sit there and say, you're doing a good job, who knows what a good job looks like, right? Everybody's like, good job. And you're like, I'm doing a good job. But when your lactation consultant sits there and says, look, I am proud of you. And I know how hard this is. And I know what we've been up against. Like, it feels really encouraging, so that the times that I'm like, can I do this? I'm reminded that I can do it. And so she's helped me just navigate any issues, clogged ducts, supplementation, supporting what is a low supply that I started with. And I really just encourage anybody else. Like, I found her through, we had a list of people covered with our health insurance, and then I got a chance to like read through their websites and see like what they were all about, and how they talked about breastfeeding and pumping. And so once I got to her site and really fell in love with her, like the way that she talked about breastfeeding and pumping, I knew that it was going to be a good match for me. And so it's covered by our insurance. A lot of insurance companies cover some of it or all of it for you. So I really encourage you to check it out if you have the ability. And then also I know that some of them don't take insurance, and just you can pay for it up front, and they work with you on that too. So if you can see a lactation consultant, and you want to have that support, that extra like just encouragement and expertise that reminds you that little changes make big differences, I really encourage you to go see one, meet with 1 or 2 of them and see who is the best fit for you. But it really has changed just how I feel about how I'm doing, right? Like, when you're kind of at home pumping and things are getting frustrating and you're looking on the internet, you can feel kind of alone. Like, you're looking for answers, you're looking for reassurance, you're looking for just validation that like all this effort is worth it. And I feel that when I meet with my lactation consultant, where I feel that I'm lacking and I'm like, I'm not even doing that good of a job. This isn't even like how I thought it was going to be, or I'm not at pumping, or, I don't have as much of a supply as I thought I should. I'm brought back and reminded why I'm doing it, the importance of what I'm doing, how grateful that I can even do this in the first place, seeing that we had a really rough start. And it just kind of regrounds me and reminds me that like breastfeeding is not easy, exclusively pumping is not easy, raising babies is not easy, but it's so worth it. And I think that just like somebody who is there to like be your biggest cheerleader while you navigate breastfeeding and pumping, that I needed that. I really did. I've thought so many days that I was just not doing, I just wasn't good at this. And I'm just reminded that the normal look at success doesn't apply here, right? Like, we don't win for having more milk. You win for doing what you can do and being as good of a mom as you can be. And at the end of the day, that means that maybe you don't breastfeed, maybe you don't pump, maybe this is the end of your journey, or maybe you do, right? Like, it looks different for everyone. Like, there's things that we talk about that I never considered, like your own mental health when breastfeeding and pumping. Like, at what point, there are times where we've talked about, well, do the stressors outweigh the benefit of me pumping? I haven't gotten to the point where it has, right? So that's why I'm still doing this. But someone to ask you those questions so you can say, am I being more stressed out? Am I getting too stressed to make this worth doing? Or is there something I can do to make this journey continue working for me? And so I really encourage you guys just to seek out some support. The last tip that I have is to supplement carefully. I say this because after meeting with a lactation consultant who really knows their stuff, they work with doctors as well. So this isn't someone who's just like taking wild guesses. I really suggest that you carefully supplement, and only with the supervision of a lactation consultant. There are so many products that are out on the market that are labeled breastfeeding support, herbal support, breastfeeding magic potions, whatever it is. I think the best advice I've gotten off of the internet about what to take for breastfeeding was someone saying, look, if this journey is so important to you and you really want to know what's best for your body, talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. Just because something worked for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Someone taking blessed thistle and someone else taking different herbs may not work for your body. And these herbs that people are taking sometimes are really concentrated and high concentrations. And so you shouldn't just be dumping those into your body because it worked for someone else. The same thing with these like magic, lactation elixirs. I think that some of these work, and they work for different reasons. Like different herbs work for different reasons, and they address different deficiencies in your body or different things that your body is struggling with. But to know exactly what you're struggling with, you should be seeing a doctor, and you should be talking to a lactation consultant. I would never recommend that someone look at what I'm taking for breastfeeding and say, wow, I didn't know you could do those herbs, right? I'm just going to match exactly what you're doing. Even if you can't see a lactation consultant, and maybe it's not in your price range, or maybe your insurance doesn't cover it, or maybe just one is not available to you, right? But you know that there's herbs that can help you. I really suggest, if you're going to do it without the help of someone else, these natural herbs, just to take it very slowly and give yourself a couple days to a week to see if things are working for you, and try them one at a time. Because even with my lactation consultant, we only added one herb at a time to make sure that it was going to add to my life and add to my supply, and not just I'm going to add 5 things and we don't know which one helped. So supplement carefully. I really do think that these herbs and natural things like alfalfa, shatavari, goat's rue, all these things that are touted as help for breastfeeding support, they do work, but different people respond to them differently. And so if you can get someone's help and guidance, you can make the most of the herbs that will really work for you. Just supplement carefully, smartly, and if you can, with the guidance of somebody who has a lot of experience working with those natural herbs. You could take a lot of something and it could work for you. You could take a lot of something and be wasting your money. So it's really good to have someone to help you use those herbs correctly to support your breastfeeding journey or your exclusively pumping journey. I do think that supplements on exclusively pumping, because of the fact that you're not fully emptying the breast as efficiently as you would be if you were breastfeeding. The pump is just not as strong and efficient as breastfeeding is. So to efficiently empty, I really feel that the herbal support can help you keep your supply up if that's something you struggle with. So, actually I do have one more tip, and that is to use tools to help you empty the breast better. I don't know why I didn't even think of this before, but I have a hand pump, I have lactation massagers, and I have a heating pad. And basically those 3 things allow me to empty the breast better. When I was just using the pump, I wasn't emptying the breast as efficiently as I was when I was breastfeeding, and I saw a dramatic dip in my supply when I went to exclusively pumping. That being said, with the use of a hand pump, hand expression, using a heating pad before, and using the lactation massagers, I was able to better empty the breast and be able to bring the supply back up. I think that sometimes, I'm like, I just don't want to fuss with all this. But at the end of the day, the goal is to have comfortable, efficient pumping sessions. And sometimes that means adding in a heating pad or adding in lactation massagers. Maybe it's hand expressing at the end, but just to get the breast as empty as possible so you continue refilling and your supply stays strong. All right, guys, I know that was a really long video. I hope you enjoyed these tips. Let me know if you're an exclusive pumper, what are things that help you keep your supply up and keep you going on this crazy journey? Where do you find support, and what are the things that have helped you the most? Leave me a comment below. If you like videos like this, give it a thumbs up so I know to make more of them. And subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. I can't wait to see you guys again. I'll talk to you later. Bye.